Hello, everyone. My name is Calvin Ryan, and my pronouns are he, him. I am the research assistant for Dr. Antoinette Farmer, Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Rutgers School of Social Work. I will be graduating with my MSW degree in May. The IDEA Committee, which stands for Inclusion, Intersectionality, Diversity, Equity, and Advancement, was established in fall 2020 as a part of the school's strategic plan toward a more just future. The IDEA Committee advances diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives within the School of Social Work, the university as a whole, and the larger social work community. We are back with our second Research Spotlight interview, and I'm here today with Dr. Tawanda Hubbard. Dr. Tawanda Hubbard is an associate professor of professional practice at Rutgers School of Social Work. She was awarded Outstanding Professor of Clinical Specialization in 2022 and 2023. Dr. Hubbard has an LCSW and over 19 years of clinical practice and case management experience. She is a trained family therapist and certified REBT and child sexual abuse therapist with 2 postmasters in clinical practice with adolescents and social work and spirituality. Dr. Hubbard has a small private practice and consulting firm. She presents statewide, regionally, and nationally on her scholarship and practice interests, which include oppositionality and relational neglect in adolescence, inclusive leadership, dismantling structural discrimination in human service organizations, Black mental health and wellness, and understanding how young Black women transition into adulthood from foster care. Dr. Hubbard is a past president of the NASW New Jersey chapter and serves on various councils, advisory boards, and coalitions, and belongs to associations focused on social work, family relations, child adolescent development, and child welfare. Dr. Hubbard is the current president of the Alumni Council of Rutgers School of Social Work. She is also pursuing her second doctorate at Montclair State University, a Ph.D. candidate in the Family Service and Human Development Program. Hi, Dr. Hubbard. Thank you so much for agreeing to speak with me today.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for having me today. And I just want to say one thing. It is family science and human development. And so thank you for that.
Thank you, Dr. Hubbard, for that correction. So for our first question, can you please tell us about a current dissemination effort of yours that is related to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yes, thank you for that question, Calvin. That's an important question. And so, first, I want to note that there are multiple ways in which I disseminate knowledge. And so, I'll talk to you about two ways that I hold dear to my heart. And one of them is through teaching. And so, as a social work practitioner educator, I teach at the university in the MSW program and also in our DSW program. And so, here at the School of Social Work, we've adopted the framework from Dr. Barbara Love, Liberatory Consciousness Framework. And so, when you think about what is the liberatory consciousness framework, at in its essence, right? The core, it really challenges us through the framework of the four A's: awareness, analysis, action, and allyship and accountability, to really think about the ways in which we have been socialized to think and behave that perpetuates oppressive conditions and situations, right? And so, as a practitioner educator teaching in our clinical specialization program, some of the advanced courses, it's important for to equip social work students with the knowledge, and the skills, which include the theories and practice models that they'll be utilizing as they go forward to work with individuals, families, and communities, right? To really think about in our society the oppressive structures, policies, and practices that exist. Right. And so the liberatory consciousness framework is one of the ways that we do this, because when you think about um, some of the traditional models and established schools of thoughts, practice models that are taught to social workers, they're very Eurocentric in nature. And so we need to expand the perspective and really equip our social work students with the knowledge and the tools to be able to engage in critical thought, right? Because when you think about it, critical awareness and thought precedes critical action. And so, as social workers, we are champions for social justice. And so, no matter what a social worker does, at their heart is going to be fighting social injustices. And so, with that being said, having a theoretical lens and a framework that informs their psychotherapeutic approach and practice is key. And liberatory consciousness is one that we utilize. So, as that educator, I'm bringing that into the classroom space. Right. And really helping students to think through that framework and how they can put it in operation as they are interacting with clients. And also, too, when they move up the chain and become supervisors and will begin to supervise and teach other junior social workers coming into the profession. Right. I think that's really key. And then, yeah, yeah, that's what I wanna say there about that piece. Um Another way that I disseminate knowledge is also through my keynotes and webinars and presentations and talks that I hold for licensed clinical and licensed social workers, as well as other allied professionals that join those spaces. And we learn together to provide quality services because, like I stressed before, um, the models that we learn do not necessarily center inclusive intersectional lenses, right, in doing the work and providing services. And so, having different talks and conversations out in the community, statewide, regionally, and even on national levels. So, in the fall of 2023, I did present at the Council of Social Work Education annual program meeting. It was held in Atlanta in the fall of 2023. And so I was the second plenary speaker for the Teaching Institute, right? And so that talk that I presented and held, it was entitled Preparation and Reflections, Teaching About Race, Racism, and Anti-Racism Through a Liberatory Consciousness Lens. And so here I brought some of these ideas into the space to other educators, professors, right? To think about how can they incorporate liberatory consciousness into their teaching practice and pedagogy, in teaching and preparing future social workers to go out there and practice. Also, too, what's on my plate. Coming up this semester. And so in March, I am going to be presenting at the National Association of Black Social Workers in New Orleans. I'm pretty excited about that. And so, and so I am going to be presenting there, and I'm going to be presenting a conversation about navigating white spaces as professionals and really embracing and leaning into the idea of the need for liberation and liberatory consciousness. I'm going to be bringing into that space as well, to really talk about this idea of persons in Black and Brown bodies who are in professional settings and spaces where there's possibly pressure to assimilate to white norms and standards. How do you navigate that? Right? And really thinking about how there is a weathering process. There is such a thing as racial battle fatigue. And this is not a concept that I coined. And so, but this idea that we can be negatively affected psychologically, emotionally, navigating microaggressions, prejudice, racism, negative stereotypes, just the messaging that goes on in society in different spaces. And how do we negotiate that? How do we navigate that and do it in such a way that we are maintaining and holding on to our humanity and our dignity, right? In some of these spaces and climates that can really be anti-Black. And so I'm looking forward to that presentation and conversation, rich dialogue. And then also, too, I have had many opportunities to go into agencies and be able to talk about inclusive leadership, right? How do we really cultivate an inclusive practice as leaders and as supervisors, making sure that when I talk about inclusiveness, not just that everybody has a seat at the table, right? But really thinking about what are we including people into when we bring them into different spaces, opportunities, roles, right? Because the way certain social structures exist, policies and practices, they're not really that inclusive. And so when we talk about including people into and creating these inclusive spaces, we really need to be challenged to think about we might have to engage in transformation, being transformative first to really make sure that the spaces and places we're including people into, they actually will feel a sense of belonging. They just won't have a seat at the table. They can participate. Right. And there will be an embracing of diverse thought perspectives because we come from different walks of life. We have different lived realities and experiences. So we might have to transform some things for it to truly embody inclusiveness, right?
Absolutely. You make so many good points, Dr. Hubbard. Thank you so much for that very thoughtful response.
You're
Um,
welcome.
yeah, and best of luck at that conference with that presentation. That sounds very exciting.
I'm looking
Um,
forward to it.
Yeah, that's super exciting. I also think that you make a really great point about the liberatory consciousness framework, and as a student who has kind of like embraced that framework over the past year and a half at this point
Mhm.
with my education. I mean, it's been really helpful for me as a way to kind of like recognize the privileges that I hold and how that might
Yes.
impact my clients and the people that I will serve and work with, and making sure that I represent them and support them in the most effective and appropriate ways. So I think that you make a really good point about like the importance of that framework for students and for the social work profession as a whole.
Yeah, yeah. Because to me, what makes it so liberating, right, is that when we realize, Calvin, how we have been socialized into certain roles and also socialized into how we see, understand, and relate to one another, and the liberation, the freeing one's mind to be able to look at one another as being a part of this shared human family, right? This shared humanity that we have, and to be able to kind of shed those ideas and those ways in which we have been socialized to see and relate to one another, where actually we all have experiences of privilege and marginalization. And to be able, privilege is not a bad word. right? What we have to learn is how do we use our privilege? How do we use our social location, positionality, what we have access to? How do we leverage that for the benefit of all? Right? So that we can really, there's this idea that I love, be good ancestors together, right? So that we can think about how we want to fight for social justice today and justice for all today, but also for those generations that we will never even meet. Right? We inherited this society, right, Calvin? But we don't have to leave it in the same state that we got it. Can we make it better so that those future generations that we don't even meet, right? They can stand on our shoulders like we have stand on shoulders of the ancestors before us, right? And be able to kind of bring it even forward more than what we have been able to do the time that we've been on this planet, right? And so I just say, be a good ancestor with me, Calvin, and so that we can do this work together.
Absolutely, I like that. I like that. Be a good ancestor.
Mhm.
That's thinking about it. So for my next question,
Mhm.
what are the policy and or clinical implications of your dissemination efforts for the field of social work?
Yes, yes. And so, for me, the way I think about it, the work that I do, educating and training to help to expand the way that practitioners, policymakers, and decision makers think about the work, the impact of the work, think about the personhood of the people that they work with and client status, right? In a more with a more intersexual lens, with a more liberated consciousness, to me, that can inform the way they make decisions and they practice. Because when you think about the challenge and the work of the IDEA committee at the School of Social Work, you know, we one of the things we're really trying to change, right? You got to think about implicit bias and how implicit bias shows up in decision making, right? In policies. Also, too, if we can get people to think more expansive and critically and from an intersectional standpoint about individuals, groups, and communities that they work with, right? Then we won't have these kind of reductionist ideas that are really trying to drive policy, right? We can be more inclusive with looking at the problems that people deal with. And one of the things that I'm always championing, this particular idea, we have to have an expanded view about where we locate the problem. The problem is not always located in a person. The problem can be located in the system, right? In the structures, in the policies that people have. And one of the values that we have in our society tends to be an individual value, where we look to value the individual. And so we're always looking at the individual, the individual's the problem, so then the solution needs to come from the individual. But what about the system being the problem or the policy being the problem? And so um, our decision makers, policymakers, practitioners, they need expansive lenses to really think about some of the issues that are emerging present day, our current issues, to be able to really champion, right? And really be able to put forth strategies and solutions that would be more inclusive, right? And to be able to meet people where they're at and to focus more on the systems. Like a good example can be we talk about resilience all the time, right? And so we talk about how individuals and groups of people are very resilient. They get through these adversity and they're strong, right? And so often there are a lot of programs and interventions that are targeted to really build up the skills of the individual, right? But do we ever think about, Calvin, think with me about this. Do we ever think about Why is it that some groups of people have to be more resilient than other groups of people? You know, if we focus so much on the individual level of resiliency, what about the systems? What about the policies? Like, what about the structures that exist? If they were more equitable, if they were more just, then would those individuals or groups have to be so resilient,
Wow. Yeah, no,
right?
yeah, that's a really interesting point, and I think you're absolutely correct, and I think, also kind of, like, thinking about the systems, these systems are created by, like, those that have privilege, so I feel like that
Yes,
might go into, like, why we don't look at that too much because
exactly.
yeah,
Who
yeah,
who does it serve to look at it, right? And who does it not serve to look at it? And that's true. And so to me, if we can get the practitioners and policymakers to think differently, and so where I contribute to that in the work that I do, can I get them in the room with me, whether virtually or in person, so we can start thinking about some of these ideas and how we were trained to think and get liberated around that so we can have this more expansive way of looking at situations. And there was one that I forgot to tell you about with my dissemination efforts, Calvin.
mhm,
I am one of the trainers from Rutgers, with Rutgers, who is doing webinars on implicit bias with frontline workers um, throughout the state of New Jersey, like the Board of Social Services and our shelters, from the Division of Family Development, right? And so, so just doing a lot of work out there trying to engage people who are frontline workers to really look at, how are you making decisions? How are you thinking through things, right? Looking at policies and practices, knowing when to speak up, right? Because we advocate alongside of and on behalf of persons in client status, right? And so, there's a lot of good work I'm out here doing in the community through my dissemination when it relates to professional development, teaching, and then another day we'll have a conversation on some of the work that I'm doing because I am pursuing my second doctorate, and so looking at understanding how young Black women are transitioning to adulthood from foster care, what's the role of the child welfare system and really helping them to prepare to be Black women, right, in America? And so you got to look out for that research that's going to be coming down the pike soon, but really challenging the way we look at systems and the way that we are looking at people, right?
absolutely, and we will definitely, keep our eyes peeled for that future research from you, Dr. Hubbard. Uh,
Yes.
Thank you so much. It sounds like you're doing so many different incredible projects and amazing work, and thank you for all that you do.
Oh, my pleasure, Calvin. My pleasure. It's exciting to talk about this work because it is important, necessary work for us to really be able to reimagine and to look to have that just future that we all deserve to live in.
Absolutely. I couldn't have said it better myself. Um, Thank you so much, Dr. Hubbard. It's been great speaking with you, and I hope you all will tune in for our next Research Spotlight interview. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.